Hello and welcome to another episode of Shaping Your Success channel, brought to you by the Law Society of Scotland and Hay Legal. I'm Dr. Deborah Benson. I'm the founder and director of the Directors Convention, which is a training and leadership development company. And today I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Sarah Gillard, Chief Executive of the charity Blueprint for Business and formerly Director of Purpose and Special Projects at the John Lewis Partnership. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you.
Can I start by asking you a little bit about your over 25 years of experience leading a fast-paced commercial environment? You've had a lot of impressive titles there, but I think my favourite is Mission Director at John Lewis.
Doesn't it? It sounds
wonderful. It does, it does. So perhaps you can tell us a bit about that role and that fabulous title, and also tell us why John Lewis is a little bit special as an organisation.
Yeah, really happy to. Well, I'll start with the organisation. Actually, I joined it probably about 14 years ago now, having come from other retailers where we can talk a bit more about this if you like, but where making money was the only goal, not just the primary goal, but the only goal, particularly for a privately owned business that I worked for. And I joined the John Lewis Partnership because I had become disillusioned with the way that those businesses worked, and I was interested to see if there were alternatives or whether this was just how business was. And the John Lewis Partnership, as you may know, is the UK's largest employee-owned organisation, so it's owned by the 80,000 people who work in it. And I joined, to be honest, pretty cynical. I didn't think that it would really make any difference. And within a week, the cynicism disappeared, and I became fascinated by the organisation. I mean, it is quite unique, but I think some of the ways that it does things are very translatable to other organisations. And I moved around quite a lot inside the organisation. So my background was merchandising, which is sort of the unglamorous side of buying, where the buyer goes off to New York and you're back in the office adding up what they've bought on a spreadsheet and seeing how much we should sell it for. So that's what merchandising did. But after I joined the John Lewis Partnership, I started moving around different departments because I became extremely motivated by trying to find ways in which this organisation could last for another 100 years. And believe me, that had not been my motivation in any previous job. It was how quickly can I get out of the office and get back to my actual life after 5 p.m. So the switch in me was really significant in my sort of internal motivation. But it meant that I moved around from commercial strategy to people strategy, culture, leadership, governance, operating model, innovation and entrepreneurship, and eventually to purpose. And so the mission director role it only lasted for a short amount of time, and it sort of morphed into this unusual role, even more intriguingly titled, of Director of Special Projects. That position only comes up about once every 25 years, and it's typically when the organisation is going through some kind of transformational change and they need somebody without operational day-to-day, responsibilities to be thinking about the long-term nature of the organisation and what it's trying to achieve, because it was basically invented as an experiment in how to do business differently. And obviously quite a lot happened over the past 3 years. So they decided that it was time to recreate the role of Director of Special Projects. And so I spent a couple of years really investigating the history of the partnership, how people felt about it, and what potential it could have for the future to play its original role, which was an experiment really in how to do business in a way that benefited all stakeholders. Seems like a very popular and fashionable idea now, but 100 years ago it was so radical that the founder had to go through an act of parliament to give the organisation away to its employees, because it was not a usual thing to do.
Wow, that is something I did not know. They actually had to get an act of parliament to do that. That's quite incredible, isn't it? I mean, that sounds like the most amazing job. How did you tear yourself away from that to come and be chief executive of charity after all that commercial experience?
Well,
tell us about Blueprint.
Well, so having had that incredible rich experience at the John Lewis Partnership and discovering that if an organisation can rediscover or redefine or articulate its purpose, the why it exists, so much of all of my other jobs would have been so much easier, because it defines success for an organization. So it helps sort of unite people in terms of what they're trying to achieve. That helps define the strategy. It helps you make decisions. It helps determine what the priorities are. It shapes your culture. It helps you recruit people. It helps you think about what kind of leadership styles, are we interested in? It helps you think about your commercial propositions and what you do. It helps you think about your brand. I mean, it literally helps everything. And I sort of, having discovered this for myself, thought, well, I've found the source of the Nile here. I need to tell other people about this because, having been inside organizations, all of which are struggling with the same questions, they can do a brilliant strategy, but then it doesn't kind of operationalize. Or they can see that they've got cultural problems and they don't know how to fix them because it feels so kind of human and deep-seated. Or there's just something kind of not working in the system that is the organization, and they mess around with the structure and organizational charts and things to try and fix it, and that doesn't really fix it. So I could see that many organizations were sort of stuck or struggling with a problem that wasn't intellectual, it was human. And I saw the role that articulating purpose could play. And so having done that at the John Lewis Partnership, I was really looking around to see, well, how do I spread what I've discovered more broadly, beyond just going to work for another single organization. And I found Blueprint, that is this brilliant tiny charity with kind of huge clout, in that it's got a really interesting network of very senior people across business and academia and investors and policymakers, that has thought deeply about purpose-led business over a decade or more, and is sort of helping a number of organizations explore what that means for them. So it was too interesting an opportunity to turn down. And so, I made the leap out of the commercial world into the charity sector.
You're talking about things that I'm passionate about, vision, purpose, values. I think they should underpin everything we do in business. And I totally agree that you can have the best strategy in intellectual terms, but if you don't have vision, purpose and values underpinning it, it's going to fail. It's forgetting the people bit, isn't it? If we could get more businesses to be purpose-led, could they create a positive impact in the world?
Well, I think it is just the case that business has got the most influence over the kind of society that we live in. I mean, we can discuss whether that should be the case. Is it particularly democratic? And perhaps even 50 years ago, it wasn't the case. Perhaps there were, other institutions, particularly governments, that had more influence. But I think the scale of business nowadays, the influence they have over our lives, the influence they have over the natural world, we spend half of our waking hours inside businesses, many of us. So business is a huge engine of social change, and it has massive impacts on people, society, and the environment that we live in. So I think recognizing that is the first step, and then also recognizing that business is the best organizing mechanism that we've discovered that can harness human creativity and ingenuity and imagination and opportunities for collaboration, and channel all of that into achieving extraordinary things. And so the progress that business has helped us make in terms of raising prosperity levels and health and well-being and all the way that we live, extraordinary progress. But I think it's also really clear that unfettered business has also created a lot of distress for people and planet, environmental damage, societal inequality. There's lots of sort of externalities that business can create, but it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, business is a human construct. Surely it was invented for our benefit, to benefit people and planet. And so I think it's got an enormous potential to play that role. I think it just means that we have to think about it slightly differently. And rather than thinking of business being entirely for the service of financial interests and just thinking about money as the end goal, if we thought actually that business is there to serve society and create shared value, which it can do extremely well, and if it does that very well, then profits an outcome, it sort of changes the paradigm in which you think about business. And then I think also beyond that, if you think that business is the kind of weird alien thing that sits outside humanity, it's just people coming together to achieve things that they couldn't do on their own. So really it's a series of human relationships. And if those human relationships are based on dignity and respect and the understanding that all humans want autonomy over their lives and a sense of meaning, and actually that they are generally well-intentioned and want to feel like they're contributing to positive change. You know, if you take all of that and base your assumptions around business and people on what's possible, what's the potential for, you know, creating shared value, it means that business becomes an incredibly positive tool of societal change, rather than this sort of either neutral or worst case damaging feature of society that sort of sits outside of, you know, humans, which is an odd concept when you think about it.
I mean, that's a really powerful argument. You're very, very convincing and obviously very passionate about it. I've worked with literally thousands of directors doing this development work that I now do, and from across the world. And one of the things I've found is many have become quite battle weary, quite cynical about corporate responsibility and sustainability, the environment, ESG, those sort of things. And I noticed that you quoted Andrew Hill in a recent post saying, "The movement to encourage more companies to make a long-term commitment to environmental and social goals stands at a crossroads." Expand on that a bit for us. It's such a powerful argument. It is so obvious that businesses should do well, especially global businesses who, frankly, you know, are wealthier than a lot of governments and have a lot more impact. So why is it that this commitment stands at a crossroads? What do you think the problem is there?
Well, I mean, I think obviously the last few years have been extraordinary for many reasons. If we take sort of from the financial crash all the way through to the pandemic, this generation of business leaders has probably experienced more extreme events and change than any other. Yep. And also their ability to see that on a global scale is greater than any previous generation, you know, because of social media and all the rest of it. So we can see the impact that business can have globally across all of these different dimensions. And because of the nature of the sort of scale of change that's happened over the last few years, things are sort of unfrozen at the moment. You know, that there is a sense from all stakeholders that things could be better. You know, we could orientate the system to one where people and planet flourish. Employees want that. Customers want that. Investors want that. Regulators want that. Government wants that. Society wants that. Communities want that. Citizens want that. The kind of alignment of interests around what kind of future are we collectively trying to build? Not a political kind of framing, but just, you know, one where we're all living on a healthy planet, one where people have access to basic food, energy, you know, sanitation, clean air, access to opportunities and education. These are non-controversial kind of goals. And this generation of business leaders has both seen the impact, potential impact of not having that, and has got this opportunity where things are unfrozen, where we can actually shift a lot of the status quo, a lot of the inertia that otherwise means that change is incremental. We've got this moment where stakeholders are aligned, people are wanting change, and I can see that if we carry on down the path that we were on, we're going to end up in, as Andrew would say, you know, dystopia. Massive environmental damage, massive inequality, the degradation of societal trust, political institutions, democracy, you know, all of the kind of foundational things that our prosperity is built on. Or we have a choice, and I think genuinely it is a choice, where we imagine a different future and we consciously pull the levers and construct the system and nudge things so that we begin to take a different path. And I think because we're at this moment, you know, the choice is a pretty unique one. However, because that previous path is what was known, the temptation to sort of, you know, go back to what you know, actually it's much simpler if you're just trying to solve for maximizing short-term financial returns. Decision making is easier. You can track it. You can put it on a spreadsheet. You can benchmark it. Investors can tell which companies are doing well. You know, life is simple then. I mean, it doesn't end well, but in the short term, it maybe simplifies a whole lot of things. Whereas this other path, you know, you've got to take in a whole lot of qualitative data. You've got to think about people and relationships and long-term stuff. You've got to think about stuff that you can't measure in quantitative ways. You've got to use judgment. You've got to listen to people. You've got to imagine vision 10, 15, 20 years ahead, you've got to create a different alternative to the one that we've been running the economy on for the last 50 years. And that feels, challenging, but the end result looks more attractive.